Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how do you take those when Harry met Sally moments from the restaurant and put those into your bedroom.
It's going to be a good segment, everyone. Tune in.
We're doing it right now. Dr. Renee Renardi joins us.
Yeah. It's really more focused on how to heat things up in your marriage, right? If you lose that spark.
Right.
It can happen. It does happen.
It happens all the time. So today I want to cover a number of different things. Just how common is this? What are some causes for it, and what can people do? So it's a lot of information to cover because there's so much involved with what produces that spark and how does that spark fade for people over time. So a very appropriate topic, of course, for Hump Day, right?
Right.
And
or Friday if you're on
or your
schedule.
Friday.
Yeah.
But I think it's important because people feel so uncomfortable talking about sexuality. Now it's out there everywhere, you know, in the media. But when we talk about real sex, everybody gets real uncomfortable, right? So, and people get especially uncomfortable when in their marriage, things aren't quite what they want them to be. Right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just how common is this, right? So that people recognize that they're not alone. So this is something actually that affects about 40 million Americans struggle from low desire, okay? So this is an incredibly prevalent problem, and it's a big deal. If you ask people how happily married they are, if sex is good in their relationship, they think that sex only contributes maybe 15 to 20% of overall marital satisfaction. But when sex isn't good, when there's differences in desire, it can create like 50 to 70% impact for how dissatisfied people become in their marriages.
Is that more men than women or women than men?
You know, about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men struggle from difficulties with sexual desire. So, and that comes from a number of different places, but I think just understanding how prevalent this is. So again, 1 out of 3 women, 1 out of 7 men, 40 million Americans, that's a huge number. So, and we look at just, you know, how dead is that spark, okay? So there's 2 things. There's low sex marriages, and in order to fall into that category, is sex less than 25 times a year, and usually that's thought of as once every 2 weeks or something like that. Okay. And then there's no sex marriages. No sex doesn't mean absolutely no sex at all, but sex that occurs less than 10 times in a year. So it's not happening that often, all right? So it's understanding that there is no sex and there is low sex. There's some marriages that have never been consummated, that they've never had sex ever. And that's something that people just do not talk about, but it occurs. Wow. So it's important to understand, first of all, that you're not alone. These things occur. Sometimes they're primary. They've always been there where somebody's lacked desire. Sometimes it's secondary where maybe there was desire earlier on in a marriage, but then it kind of fizzles with time.
And is that because... Go ahead. Well, I was going to ask, is that because we let stress sort of take over our lives and become so consumed with everything else around us but our partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes.
Thank you.
And a million other factors.
Thank you.
And there's a million other factors too, okay? So that it's really understanding what are the different causes. And if we have time, we can cover that, you know, maybe a little bit now. So
yeah,
if we look at, you know, what's going on, all right? So many causes and variables. There's psychological variables that contribute to low desire in relationships. So, and some of those psychological variables can be things like shame, guilt, obsessive compulsive disorder. If somebody has contamination, sex can feel dirty on actual contamination level and not just on a, you know, morality type of thing. But that's another issue too. So looking at some of those things, body image also falls under the psychological variables. Looking under physical variables, are people having medication side effects? Do they have a medical issue? Do they have sexual dysfunction? You know, what's going on there? And there's a lot of disorders that specifically affect females and specifically affect males that can make intercourse painful or not really possible. So it's looking at intimacy in different ways as well.
Okay, and more on this subject, much more when we come back.